Well, hello, my friend. We gotta stop meeting like this.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny given the theme of the conversation that it's, you know, the future and everything.
Yeah, really.
We've got such an unusual setup here.
Let me ask a really simple question. Are you a traitor?
Our breaking news this evening is the identity of the man who sent the Obama administration into defend and explain mode this week. His name is Edward Snowden. He's an American former CIA employee and computer technician.
Mr. Snowden has been charged with very serious crimes. We understand that he departed Hong Kong yesterday and that he arrived in Russia.
Snowden is hoping to convince the Russian government to let him stay in Moscow.
He should do what many people who have taken issue with their own government do, which is accept the consequences of that act of civil disobedience.
Edward Snowden's actions have elicited a range of reactions.
Is he a hero or a criminal, whistleblower or traitor?
When people ask this question, and it's a fairly common question, I think they're missing what's important, which is it doesn't really matter whether I'm a hero or traitor or anything else. I'm just a citizen with a voice. I'm a guy who gave information to American journalists, to the free press, so that we could know what's going on, what the reality of our world is, what the government's doing in our name, but without our knowledge and consent. The real question they should be asking is not, is this guy a hero, is this guy a traitor? It's, would you rather not know what's really going on?
The United States government is collecting all of our metadata.
At listening stations like this one in Cornwall, GCHQ taps fiber optic cables that carry internet data, huge databases containing personal information about a wide range of people, are currently not subject to any legislation.
I don't think people often think about the reality of this situation at hand. You're a guy they talk about on the news. You're not even real. You just did something that pissed some people off.
I think he's a traitor. I hope we can catch him.
Snowden is, quote, a grandiose narcissist who deserves to be in prison. And Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina tweeted, I hope we follow Mr. Snowden to the ends of the earth.
Snowden put a lot of Americans' lives at risk. Snowden broke the law. Whistleblowers do not run to Russia and try to get protection from Putin.
I don't think he should be brought home without facing the music. He broke the laws of the United States.
He did break the law, and I think there should be a penalty to that. But I think what he did in educating us should be taken into consideration.
No, I would bring him home. The American government was acting illegally. That's what the federal courts have said.
I'm being charged under laws that don't provide a public interest defense. You're not allowed to argue to the jury or even mention why you did what you did. Rather, they create a closed courtroom where they control the kind of evidence that you can present. They control the kind of arguments that you're allowed to provide. Thomas Drake, another NSA whistleblower, he couldn't even say the word whistleblower because it might make the jury think about whether or not what the government was doing was wrong.
Given the fact of an open investigation, I'm not going to dwell on Mr. Snowden's actions or his motivations. I will say that our nation's defense depends in part on the fidelity of those entrusted with our nation's secrets. If any individual who objects to government policy can take it into their own hands to publicly disclose classified information, then we will not be able to keep our people safe.
The reason the United States government justified its very heavy response to the revelation of unlawful mass surveillance in the United States was that they said it was saving lives. It was keeping us safe. Now, we're in 2015, and they've never shown a single instance, a single case where even one person was harmed as a result of these disclosures. And despite the fact that this is American society, this is supposed to be a free and open and liberal society where we have freedom of the press, defenders of the NSA want to talk about the theoretical risks of journalism instead of the concrete harms of surveillance. And that, I think, is something that we should reject.
Let's think about the world for a minute, which I think that you probably think about quite a bit. How do you think we're doing right now?
It's something that makes me simultaneously optimistic and pessimistic. We do have the opportunity to basically ruin everything and end up in a garbage pile. There are issues with climate change, the exploitation of technology, new developments in the relationship between the governing and the governed. We are living in a time today where people with the most power and most privilege in society are held to a lower standard of behavior than the most ordinary people among us.
What would you change if you could change anything in the world?
I think it would be the level of fairness. We have a fundamental instability in many regions around the world. There's fighting, there's terrorism, there are crime waves, and there's also deprivation of many basic resources. The things that our ancestors throughout millennia of human progression have been taken for granted, but now are becoming a little bit more scarce and a lot more controlled. The idea that we have 1% of individuals in the world controlling a much larger graded percentage of resources than another 90% of people is not just an economic injustice, it's a moral injustice. And today, I think we're seeing the dangers of what happens when we don't address those problems.
Why wouldn't the NSA interrupt this interview? Could they?
They're definitely listening right now because we're using a Google service. And Google is actually, the largest internet service providers in the United States had created secret systems of cooperation to provide access to the communications of anybody who's suspected or targeted of being of interest, that they could secretly provide information directly off of their servers. And the technology that we're using right now, Google Hangouts, creates copies of these video feeds that they can then provide on request to, for example, the FBI. Now, in the case of an American, that would require, hopefully at least, a warrant. But for everyone else in the world, they don't use warrants at all. There's no court that's involved in reviewing the evidence against someone. Instead, a single official in the United States signs an authorization, not on the basis of evidence, but simply on a reasonable, articulable suspicion. They can entitle themselves to all of your private records from all of these services. But there's a broader point about that, which is that this is what mass surveillance means. The government doesn't like to use the word mass surveillance. You'll never see them utter those words. Instead, they'll talk about bulk collection. Bulk collection is a euphemism for mass surveillance. What it means is as you send your emails, as you go through your web transactions every day, as you visit this site, as you post on Facebook or send a tweet, all of these transactions, as they cross the physical lines that are buried under the ground and under the sea, are intercepted, they're analyzed, they're filtered, they're stored, and they're retained. What the NSA will say is the difference is, yes, we have it, yes, we keep it, yes, we do things with it, but we promise we won't use it for a bad purpose unless you're a bad guy. And when you think about it, at first glance, it seems very persuasive. We go, well, if we're not doing anything wrong, we don't have anything to be afraid of, right? But it's not really about something to hide. It's about something to lose. And that's our power in civil society. That's our influence. That's our rights. And this is not just a US problem. Russia, China, France, Germany, they're all beginning to do this. And they're saying, we want to engage in pre-criminal investigation. We want to watch everyone all the time because they might do something wrong someday. And we want to go back in time and see what they did. If we're saying simply thinking ideas that are unacceptable to the United States creates an open season without regard to whether or not they'd actually done anything wrong or not. That's a radically different world that we're living in. That's a radically different policy that we've adopted. And while some people may say, oh yeah, sure, let's go there, everyone should agree that these are decisions that should be made by the public rather than by a few officials sitting behind closed doors. Arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you've got nothing to hide is the same as saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. Individual rights benefit everyone collectively. These are fundamental protections that once lost for a moment are lost forever.
Do you miss us back home?
Oh, of course. You know, I've constantly said that I'd be happy to come home. It's unfortunate that the U.S. government has been unwilling to offer a fair trial. They simply want to forget about it. They want to move on. They want to ignore it. They want to pretend the problems aren't there. But thanks to the advancement of technology, I'm more connected to people at home now than I have been ever before. I'm able to sit here in the U.S. with you. I'm able to speak at universities, and I've got to say, it's incredible, and I feel incredibly fortunate. Ultimately, home isn't about what you own. It's about what you feel. It's about your connections. And what I've found more than anything else from living in exile is that home can become something that travels with you. Even though I've lost some things, I sleep better now than I ever have before because I can be proud of the decisions I've made. And when I think about what ultimately matters when you look back on your life and you think about what you've done, it's that you understand what you care about, and ultimately you can be proud of the choices that you've made.